Hey guys, it's Robert here, and this is my review of the X-PLUS Gigantic Series Godzilla 1964 from the movie Mosura Tai Gojira, aka Mothra vs. Godzilla, aka Godzilla vs. the Thing as it's known in North America. The first thing that I want to say is that I absolutely love this figure. I love the likeness, I love the sculpt, I love everything about this guy. I think that he is a great figure overall, and I think that X-PLUS just did a really great job with this figure. This is my first RIC Boy Edition, as well as my first RIC Boy Gigantic, and I have to say that overall I'm incredibly pleased with him. The RIC Boy comes with two special features. The first are these translucent blue dorsal plates. Unlike the standard version, which comes with traditional bone white dorsal plates, the RIC Boy has translucent blue, just like the Gigantic 62 from King Kong vs. Godzilla. The second special feature is this extra mouthpiece, which allows collectors to display the figure with an open or a closed mouth. Now personally, I think that this is a great feature because it allows collectors to change up their figures and gives you another option when displaying them. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I show you how to change out the extra mouthpiece. I prefer a closed mouth Godzilla. I'd say the majority of Godzilla figures out there have an open mouth, as if he's about to roar or unleash his atomic breath. So it's nice to have a closed mouth Godzilla, especially when it comes to the Mosugoji, who looks so much more menacing with his mouth closed. Now because of this figure caused a lot of controversy before he was even released. Pictures were posted on the RIC Boy site that showed the definitive Mosugoji figure. In these pictures, he looked amazing. He looked like he stepped right out of the movie. He was absolutely perfect, especially with that closed mouth. I mean, these pictures had collectors drooling because he looked so much like the creature from the film. Then a few months later, pictures of the actual figure surfaced that weren't exactly flattering. The likeness wasn't as good, the pictures were taken with a flash, so a lot of the detail was lost in the sculpt, and the closed mouth didn't look nearly as closed as it did in the pictures that were shown on the RIC Boy site. So this had a lot of collectors worried. Now flash forward to the release of this figure. People start getting him in the mail and quickly realize that not all closed mouthpieces are created equally, and not all of them close as well as they should. Once you receive this figure, you'll notice that when you remove the mouthpiece, there's a little peg in the back that fits into a slot, which allows you to swap out the jaws. If this peg is off by just a little, you're going to have a mouth that doesn't close all the way. Naturally, this had a lot of people upset because we pay a lot of money for these figures, especially the RIC Boy editions, and if a figure is advertised as a closed mouth version, then it should have a mouth that actually closes. So I understand why people were upset by this. I understand the controversy. I think that I was fortunate that I received a figure that's mouth is a little bit more closed than some of the figures that I've seen. It's not as closed as it could be. Does that bother me? Yeah, it bothers me a little bit. Do I wish that it closed more, that it was closed all the way? Yeah. But does it detract from my ability to enjoy this figure or to appreciate him? No. Like I said, I think this is a great figure. I love the sculpt. So overall, I'm very happy with him, and the fact that the mouth doesn't close perfectly doesn't bother me as much as it could. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about the things that I like about this figure. Again, I love this guy. I think that the sculpt is great. I think that the likeness is fantastic. I like his pose. It's faithful to the film. To me, he really does look like he just stepped right out of the movie. They did a really great job with the attention to detail on the tree bark texture of his skin. The amount of ridges and grooves that he's got is just mind-blowing. It just really shows how much X-PLUS has stepped up their game, especially with these gigantic figures. I like the paint job. I like the subtle highlights that he's got airbrushed onto his legs and down the middle of his chest. The paint on his claws is really great. He's got that bony white color airbrushed on that's simple but very effective. I love the eyes. The Mosugoji had big googly eyes like a Muppet. They were kind of weird, but they worked for the movie, and X-PLUS has done a great job of recreating that. I was a little worried when I first heard about this figure, because I was afraid that X-PLUS was going to do the standard white eyes with black irises painted on top. So I was thrilled when I got this guy to see what they had done. He actually has clear plastic eyes painted white from behind with black irises painted on top. This creates a really cool 3D effect that really brings the figure to life. Now as for the face itself, I think that X-PLUS has done an excellent job. They really captured the likeness of Godzilla from the film, especially with the furrowed eyebrows that give the Mosugoji his trademark perpetual scowl. Let's talk about the translucent blue dorsal plates. I'm going to turn this guy around so you can get a nice look at them here. So when I first ordered this guy, I didn't think I was going to like the translucent blue plates, but when I saw him in person, that quickly changed. Now, one of the issues that people had with this guy was the fact that the standard open mouth version comes with the traditional bony white colored plates, and the RIC Boy comes with the translucent blue. The standard version has an open mouth, and the RIC Boy has a closed mouth. So the reason that this bothered people is the fact that Godzilla's fins light up and turn blue when he's about to unleash his atomic breath. It'd make more sense for the open mouth figure to have the translucent blue plates and the closed mouth figure to have the traditional bony white. So a lot of people felt like these paint schemes should be reversed, and at first I agreed. But again, once I saw him in person, I realized that I actually prefer this a lot better. The translucent blue plates just add an extra touch of flair that really make him stand out and really help to make him unique. Do I wish that X-PLUS had done a standard version with a closed mouth and the traditional bony white plates? Yeah, but overall, I'm really happy with this guy, and I've come to really love these translucent blue plates and the closed mouth on this figure. Now, let's take a look at them up close. When I first heard about these, I was a bit concerned. I was worried we were going to get some clear, smooth, really plastic-looking dorsal spines, but it's actually the opposite. I love the amount of detail that's put into these spines. There's so much texture here. There's so many bumps and ridges that really stand out, especially on close inspection. I've seen a few people light these up, and while I haven't tried it yet myself, I'll say that this figure looks great as a light up. The fins really glow, and there's no bleed through whatsoever. Let's talk about the open mouth option on this figure. I'll go ahead and remove the closed mouth and replace it with the open one so you can see what it looks like. Now personally, I think that the open mouth on this figure is just a bit too wide. He doesn't really look like the Mosugoji anymore. To me, he looks more like the Sandai Kaiju Goji from Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Those were actually the same suit, but it had to be modified for Ghidorah after it was damaged in the previous film, giving him a somewhat different look. So I guess this could be cool because it gives you another option for displaying this figure, but again, to me, it just looks a bit too wide, which is another reason why I prefer to display this figure with a closed mouth. To switch the mouth back, you just pop the mouthpiece out and replace it with the other one. Now, one thing that people have said about this figure is that he doesn't look great from every angle, that he looks like the Mosugoji from some angles, and that from other angles he doesn't look like him at all. Well, show me a figure that does look great from every angle. The suits don't even look great from every angle. In particular, the Godzilla 1954 and the Godzilla 1984 are two of my favorite suits, but they both look pretty derpy from certain angles, especially from the front, where they each had eyes pointing in different directions. So I think that people are being a little too hard on this guy, and I think that he looks great no matter what. I've looked at him from just about every angle, and I can always find at least some part of him that maintains the likeness of the Mosugoji from the film. So let's talk about some of the things that I don't like about this figure. I do agree that the posture is a little weird. Some people have said that he's too hunched over, that his neck is leaning forward, that his legs are short and stubby, and I do agree with some of those points. The Mosugoji in particular was tall and slim as far as Godzilla suits are concerned. The legs were longer, the body and the torso were slimmer, so this guy does look a little overweight. His legs do look a bit baggy. Some people have said that his arms and his hands are too small, and I can kind of see that. But again, does it detract from this figure? No. While I agree with some of those criticisms to a point, it doesn't affect my ability to appreciate this guy. I like his pose, I like his stature, and I think that he's just a great figure overall. One thing that bothers me about any Godzilla is a tail stand. Now, this figure does come with a tail stand. As you can see, it's not a big one, it's not terribly noticeable, and it's certainly not as bad as some of the tail stands that I've seen. But anytime a figure comes with a tail stand, it's going to bother me, because I prefer when they actually take a little extra time to sculpt a tail that touches the ground so that the figure can support itself and doesn't need a tail stand. Again, this one's not terrible, it doesn't really bother me that much, but just the fact that he has one at all and just knowing that it's there, it's always going to be a little annoying to me. So, aside from a few minor issues, I think that this is a great figure. He's my favorite Gigantic Series figure so far. In fact, he's my favorite Mosugoji so far. I'm going to go so far as to say that I actually prefer this guy over the 30cm Mosugoji, including the closed mouth version. I know a lot of you believe that's the greatest Godzilla 1964 figure ever made. Don't get me wrong, he's an amazing figure. I'm actually in the process of trying to get one right now myself. However, I just don't think that the likeness is there on the 30cm Godzilla 1964, and I think that this guy looks a little bit more like the Mosugoji. Again, don't get me wrong, I think that that's an amazing figure, but my problem with the 30cm has always been that while he's an amazing figure, he just doesn't look like the monster from the film, and I think that this guy does. This guy, in my opinion, really nails the look of the Mosugoji for me. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say I prefer this guy over the M1 Godzilla 1964. Now, don't hate me. I know that a lot of collectors believe that the M1 Godzilla 1964 is a holy grail. I get that. He's also an amazing figure and I wish that I had one. However, I personally think that the likeness on this guy is just a teeny bit better than the M1. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me on this, but I think that this figure is just a little better. This guy, for me, really captures the look of the Mosugoji. This is the best version of the Godzilla 1964 that I've ever seen thus far, but that's just my opinion. So, while we're here, let's do a little size comparison. This is the Gigantic Series Godzilla 1954, the Shodai Goji from the original Gojira. So we have two great figures here, Godzilla 1954 and Godzilla 1964. And you can see that they're about the same height. However, between these two figures, I actually prefer the Mosugoji, the Godzilla 1964. With that said, Godzilla 1954 is actually my second favorite suit design right after the Godzilla 1984. This just says it all. He's the original. He is the definitive Godzilla design. However, I have two issues with this figure. The first is that while overall he looks good and captures the design of the 1954 Godzilla, the sculpt really isn't that great. He's missing a lot of detail. I've always felt the sculpt was really muddy, particularly in the chest and the shoulders. I don't know what Yuji Sakai was thinking because he just loses a lot of detail on close inspection. My second problem with him is the eyes. Now, in the original film, the Godzilla 1954 had two eyes that were looking different directions, and they recreated that on this figure. While he looks great from the side, when you look at him from the front, he looks really derpy. Now, again, the suit had the same issue with the eyes going two different directions, so because of that, he's technically more suit accurate and faithful to the film, but I just wish X-PLUS had done something to correct that, like they did with the recent 30cm Yuji Sakai Godzilla 1954. X-PLUS corrected the eyes so that he's still looking down at an angle, but at least both his eyes are pointed the same direction. Even though the suit had the same problem, it always bugs me that the eyes are pointed different directions, and you really can't look at him from the front. Not to mention, the eyes are literally just painted flat black and flat white with no detail at all. With that said, I actually feel the opposite about the Godzilla 1964. I think this guy is absolutely amazing. The amount of detail on him is incredible. I mean, he is super detailed when you look at him up close. So between these two figures, while I prefer the 1954 design over the 1964, I prefer the 1964 figure over the 1954. This, to me, is a perfect figure. Like I said, he's my current favorite Gigantic Series figure from X-PLUS, and he's just a much better figure overall. With that said, I'm going to put this guy down. So, overall, I love this figure. I think that he's an incredible piece. I think the sculpt is fantastic. I think the likeness is great. I like the pose. Everything about him just makes him the perfect Mosugoji for me. As far as what's next for the Gigantic series, I'm going to go a little bandwagon here and say that I would like to see either a Gigantic 1984 or a Gigantic 1989, the Bio Goji from Godzilla vs. Biollante. I would love to see X Plus do a Gigantic Series 1989, mostly because I want to have a Gigantic Series X Plus figure that can compete with my Tokyo Marui Godzilla 1989, the big mechanical Godzilla that they made way back in 1994. Other than those two, I would like to see either a Gigantic 1991, I would love to see a Gigantic 1992, pretty much any Godzilla from the Heisei series. If X Plus can make the definitive gigantic Heisei Godzilla, I'll be happy and they'll have my money just like that. As far as this figure is concerned, I love this guy. I love everything about him. I think that X Plus has really captured the definitive Mosugoji for me, and overall I just think that he's a really great figure. So that does it for this review. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave your comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Sayonara!